going to make an edible I call the Alice Toklas hashish fudge, but it actually is mine. I mean, she had a recipe given to her by a friend named Brian Jason, who was some mad queen who was a friend of theirs. This is the sour diesel grown by a friend, so this is not just a known variety, it's a known gardener. That's what you care about, is who grows it. Because all of these varieties are extremely important and they're different from one another, but there's nothing like a gifted gardener and a person that you trust to grow your sacred ingredients. Pippa, thanks. So, this is really easy. This is like this brawn. And you just go until it's dust. So, I'm going to do this a little bit more, but this is pretty much dust texture. And this is a little too coarse. We'll let that go a little bit more. But we'll start something over here because it all kind of flows and it starts with oil. So I use a French walnut oil because walnuts, and not a lot, but enough. So you want to leave it. It's a nice thick pan that heats up very slowly. So we might add a little more before we're done, but we'll let it heat. While that's heating, we'll just let this powder itself away. In some ways, it's a bit like making a curry. I don't know if you heard that. Making a curry. So we have powder caked in here. I don't wash this ever because everything's dry that goes in here and everything is ultra precious, you'll see. So we have this is our herb, and we'll add this. Let's bring the pan over here. To the walnut oil. You could use other oils. The original recipe, of course, was butter. It was like a pound of butter or something, and that has its charms, but walnut oil is good. Hemp oil, of course, is very good. I choose walnut oil mainly for the flavor. It's it ends up being a reasonably. Pippa, do you want to go upstairs? Other spices. So here we have the sort of original slurry. I'm going to use this is my grandfather's whisk. So we'll whisk this very lightly and set it to heat. So we use equal amounts, in this case a tablespoon of coriander, Pippa, thank you so much. And same amount of cardamom. Smell that.
I love spices.
Yeah, so I mean, certain of these spices have tons of health-giving qualities, and I mean, they're actually a big part, I think, of the benefit of this particular product. So all of these things have health benefits. Coriander, of course, is a strong agent. So we're going to put a tiny bit of nutmeg. I use this thing. It's like kind of a joke. It says a dash, but it's a nice solid dash of nutmeg. You have to be careful with nutmeg. I mean, these other spices are delicious. You can eat them in large quantity, especially as everybody knows cinnamon. But too much nutmeg is too much nutmeg. So this is cinnamon. So everybody loves it. And it's extremely good for you. It's extremely good for diabetics. It's extremely good for everybody. It does a lot of wonderful things. You have to be careful with nutmeg, though, if you're adding it to a liquid. Because, cinnamon, because it'll form a mucilaginous texture that is just totally bizarre and unexpected and not all that fun. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to end it with a little note of South America and put what's technically called a smidgen of cayenne pepper, because there's an affinity between chocolate and chili that I don't think is fully understood. But I always like to put some degree of chili if I'm making chocolate, because sometimes it's not detectable. I mean, you might put so little that you don't taste it, but I think there's a sacred history, and you never know. Sometimes there's magic in such folklore. So anyway, I always put in. And then what we do, because there might have been some of the other herbal residue in here, we take the sort of precious but less precious spices and just swirl them around in there so they pick up. Don't apply too much heat, because the cannabinoids and whatnot, we don't know really how they react. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most of the effects are deleterious of heat. So you want to keep it to a minimum, but at the same time you want to marry these flavors, and they exist and sort of flourish at these temperatures that are at or slightly below or slightly above the boiling point. So we're going to add a little more oil to this, because I really want it to float, but not a lot. So just enough. Turn that flame way down. So the dates are very, they're a big part of the recipe. But you have to be very, 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 very careful to keep track of each and every date pit, because they are extremely hard, and they never go away, and they'll chew up your machine and break teeth and whatever else you don't want to have happen. So dates, be careful with the seeds. There's a fabulous story of a date that was found that the pit was found somewhere in an archaeological site in Israel, and it was the site that was where the dates had been famous in the ancient world, and they found some pits that were perhaps viable, and some woman, I'm sorry I can't remember her name, actually got these 3,000-year-old date pits to sprout and are now small trees. So the curiosity is high. Are these dates going to be something fabulous from the antique world? But anyway, I mean, leave it to a loving woman in a laboratory who said, let me have a hand with those date seeds. Maybe I can get something out of it. And she did. So we have 8 ounces of dates, and we have 4 ounces of dried figs. These are beautiful little mission figs. Oh, we're so lucky in California to have so many wonderful markets. But these are actually a dried fig. You can use the supermarket dried figs in the packets. They're perfectly fine. Not like this, but they're fine. And you want to take off that woody top. Sometimes if the bottoms are a bit woody, I'll cut that off too. But there's nothing here but luscious dried fruit. So I just use a beautiful old antique glass thick bowl, which is nice, and do it in hot water, and you just melt the chocolate. This is for later, and we don't have to worry about it. Just makes it flow a little better. So it's nice and hot, and I see it's just barely bubbling around the edge. So we'll add it to the fruit paste, which we've got half ground up here, because we don't want to add, we want everything to be perfectly mixed and homogeneous at the time that the nuts go in, because the nuts can't be processed for a long time. So we're very, very careful to get every smidgen of our sacred ingredients. So I've added 8 ounces of walnuts, and we have to keep this processing very carefully and blah, 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 because it's all sticky. It works a little better after the nuts start getting in. This is a simple process as well. And I mean, this is called fudge, so the imperfection of handwork is really what makes it charming. So you can fuss, but I don't, and I don't suggest you do. Just make it a little bit rough. Distinguishes it from something made by a machine. So this is a sterling silver fork that was my sister's. So these have been in the refrigerator for maybe 10 minutes, or in the freezer for maybe 10 minutes. If you have more time, you can leave them in the refrigerator all night or whatever. They're quite oily, so they don't desiccate. But we just want to move along. So we're going to do this. You can get very involved in this aspect, but it's not my forte. I just like to get, so you get these cold because you want a lot of chocolate. This is excellent 72% cocoa mass chocolate, so it's a low sugar, high quality chocolate, and we want it. It's a good part of the medicine. It's excellent food, so we want a lot on there. And of course, nobody complains about too much chocolate. So we just roll them in the molten chocolate. So we just give them a generous coating of cocoa. And then, since they need further work, we unstick them from this. You can do this in a big bowl, but this way they stay right in there. So these just nice and ready to go, and you shake this and roll it over. So that's what they look like when they're dusted. And